Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I want to show you how to crochet the cluster V stitch. This is a great stitch for baby blankets, which are the thing I love to make the most because it's nice and squishy, it's quite dense, most importantly it's quick to work up, and it's reversible, which makes it perfect for baby blankets. So for this tutorial you are going to need yarn, any weight, doesn't matter, you can use what you like. You're going to need the correct size hook for that yarn. So for this yarn that I'm going to be using, you need a 4mm crochet hook because it's double knit. Then importantly, you will need a crochet hook 2 sizes bigger than the one you are using. So in my case, a 5mm hook. Then you're also going to need some scissors and a tapestry needle to sew in your ends. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So the pattern multiple for the cluster V stitch is really easy. It is just multiples of 3. So as long as your number that you chain is divisible by 3, then this pattern will work. For my baby blanket that I'm making, that's about 60 centimeters wide, I chained 108 to start, but for this tutorial I'm just going to be making a small sample, so I'm going to chain 27. Make sure that when you are doing your starting chain that you're using a larger hook size. I like to go at least 2 hook sizes up because the starting chain on the cluster V stitch pulls tight when you work your first row, and if it's too tight then your blanket is going to banana and it won't lay flat because there's not enough slack in the starting chain to allow those stitches to spread out and lay your blanket flat. So that's why I like to use such a large hook for my starting chain. So my main body of this blanket is going to be made using a 4mm hook, so I'm using a 5mm hook for my starting chain. So I'm just chaining 27 and I'll meet you back at the end of that chain. So that's 27 chains. You want to get rid of this larger hook and get the hook that you're going to be working with for the rest of your project. As I said, I'm using a 4mm hook. And then we're going to work our first stitch into the 6th chain from the hook. So this loop on your hook, that doesn't count, so you want to count 6 down from the chains that are dangling from the end of your hook. And then into this stitch we want to work the first cluster of our cluster V stitch, and you want to work a double crochet 2 together. That's essentially turning 2 double crochets into 1, and that's what creates the little cluster. And the way we do that is we start our double crochet as normal. Don't forget I'm using American terms. So you want to yarn over and pull through, and then you want to pull through 2 loops, and then instead of finishing it off you want to yarn over, go back into the same chain, pull through 2, and then pull through all 3 to finish the stitch, and you're left with a little cluster. Then we want to chain 2, and back into that same chain space we want to work another double crochet 2 together. So again, that's yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, go back in, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through all 3, and there is our first little V stitch, and these form the foundation of the whole project that you're going to be doing. Then next you want to skip the next 2 chains and do the same again into the 3rd chain along. So that's a double crochet 2 together, chain 2, back into the same stitch, and work another double crochet 2 together. Skip 2 more chains again. Watch, because this chain closest to your V's can often bunch up quite a lot, so it's easy to miss, so make sure that you're not accidentally skipping 3 and that you are only skipping 2. And then we're going to work our little V stitch cluster all into that chain. So double crochet 2 together, chain 2, double crochet 2 together. And you want to repeat that process all the way along until you have 3 chains left on your hook. So when you have worked a V that leaves you with 3 chains, we just need to do something slightly different. So I'm going to work all the way along, and I will meet you when we have worked our last V and are left with 3 chains left. So I've worked all the way along and I have just 3 chains left, and we're still going to skip 2, but into this last chain here, instead of working a cluster V stitch, we're just going to work 1 solitary double crochet. Now, if like me, you are going to work singular rows of colour, or if you're working striped blankets and you're on a colour change, you've got 2 choices. You can either finish your double crochet with the new colour, or if you are like me and you struggle with tension when you do that, I finish the double crochet off completely. I break my yarn and I pull it through. And then what I do, because I don't sew my ends in as I go, I tend to tackle them about 10 rows at a time, but I don't want this here to be loose and affect the rest of the tension as I work up my stripes. I just secure the tail end back into the stitch just to give it a little bit of rigidity while I work the rest of the blanket. So the way I do that is I go into the stitch and I feed my yarn down the 2 loops from the double crochet that run up the side, like that. And then I straighten this little loop out and pull it tight, but not so tight that it is affecting the height of the stitch. And then later I will go in and weave those ends in once I've done a few more rows. So that's your first row. The next row, row 2, is your repeat row. That's the row that you will repeat all the way up the blanket until you're ready to finish and edge it. Now, if you are working a singular coloured project, rather than cutting the ends, this is the next step you would take. So you would just finish off your double crochet and chain 3 with your existing yarn. Because we've changed colours, I've popped my needle hook back into the top of the last double crochet that I did, and I'm going to pull a loop through and I'm going to chain 3. Then I'm going to turn my work, and then we're going to work all the way along, working into the chain 2 gaps from the previous row. We don't work into any of the clusters, we don't work into any of the tops of stitches, we purely work into these chain 2 gaps. What we are going to work is we're going to work our V stitch cluster V, which is the combination of the double crochet 2 together, chain 2, double crochet 2 together. And we're going to work those all the way along. So into the chain 2 gap, skip these, ignore these, and then the next cluster into the next chain 2 gap. We work all the way along, and I'll meet you back at the end just to show you how to do the final stitch of the row. So I'm just finishing off my last cluster stitch here. And then the last stitch of every row is worked into the final chain. In the case of this first row, we've obviously got 6 chains here, but normally you would have 3 chains. So what you want to do is into the final chain stitch before you did your cluster, you want to work just that 1 double crochet like we worked at the opposite end of the first row. You can go into 1 loop of the chain if you want, but I just like to make sure that I pop my hook through 2. I just find it gives a slightly more secure stitch. And then we're going to again work our double crochet, and I am once again going to break my yarn. Pull it through. I'm just going to quickly secure that down so I can show you how to do one more row. As I said previously, row 2 that we've just done is your repeat row, but I'll show you one more time just so that we've got it down. So if you were again using a solid colour, you would just chain 3 and turn, but because we're changing colours, we're going to join the new yarn, chain 3, turn our work, and then we're going to work our V-stitch clusters all the way along, which don't forget is the combination of a double crochet 2 together, chain 2, and another double crochet 2 together in that same spot. We ignore the clusters and we work all the way along, working only into the chain 2 spaces. Right, so I'm just working my last V-stitch cluster here now. And then our very last stitch, we want to work into the last chain from the chain 3 turn on the row below. So that's how you crochet the cluster V-stitch. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know if you attempt it and what you think, and I'll hopefully see you again for another tutorial soon. Bye!